All right, then. We are live once again. It is one on one. My name is Titilayo, so it's a pleasure being your host and being here with you once again. And there's still loads to talk about, loads to discuss, and so many opportunities to do so since we have access to amazing technology like this. One on one today is going to delve into the critical intersection of AI and cybersecurity today. We've been hearing AI up and down, here and there, and cybersecurity has become a thing that a lot of people never really thought that they would need or assumed that wouldn't be so important to them. But it is connecting with different industries on different levels now as technology evolves. So do the threats that come with using this technology, making the protection of our sensitive information more challenging and even more essential than ever. Now, today, our guest is Zaakir Mohamed, a seasoned expert in anti bribery, corruption, and compliance. And he's going to share his views and insights on how AI is transforming cybersecurity, the risks involved, and what organizations can do to safeguard their data in 2024. There's a lot of rapid advancement, and the advancement of AI tech has brought about major benefits, from automating huge tasks to enhancing decision making processes across various industries. But these advancements also come with heightened risks. Security now. Cybercriminals are increasingly using AI to even develop more sophisticated attacks, making it imperative for organizations like yours to secure themselves, strengthen their defenses. And I'm hoping that Zakir, I hope I got the pronunciation correct. First of all, welcome to One on One.
Good evening, Tetelea, and good evening to all the viewers out there. Thank you for having me on my show. And yes, you absolutely got the name 100% correct.
All right then, Zakir Mohammed, thank you so much for joining us. Now, AI's role in cybersecurity, it's become something that a lot of people didn't really think they would have to discuss or talk about. It's what other people are using. I'm gonna other people are doing that. It's never really been about us, but it's become something that's affecting people and they don't even know it. Just give us a little brief introduction into how AI is currently being used in this field of cybersecurity and some of the key benefits that it offers.
Thank you. Yeah, I think perhaps a good starting point is to take us a few years back, where we've been using, smartphones, we've been using laptops, we've been using technology for quite some time now. And over the years, technology has developed, and we've obviously embraced technology in our lives. And I think in early 2020, when we were dealing with the COVID pandemic, that is when we really, really saw firsthand how reliant all of us are on technology in our personal lives, in our businesses, etc. We all started working remotely during the pandemic. We were basically ordering our groceries online, we were conducting our businesses online, communicating with our families online. And so there was a massive, heavy reliance on technology by all of us. And obviously, with any technology that we use, there comes risks with it. And now, if we coming to the last 2 or 3 years, there's all of this talk about artificial intelligence and AI, and specifically in the last year, there's a lot of media articles out there about AI, and for most of us out there, this is quite an ethereal concept. What is AI? I'll forgive most of our viewers for thinking about the movie with Will Smith, I, Robot, where you think about AI as being these robots that are walking around our cities, functioning as human beings, etc. But to a very large extent, we have been using AI for a very long time. One simple example that I can use is our social media platforms, for example, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, etc., but more specifically, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. there's algorithms built into the social media platforms. So a live example is when you're scrolling through your reels on Instagram, you notice if you like a particular post or if you view certain posts more than others, your feed starts showing you more and more similar posts. That is basically AI at play. It's basically learning your behavior when you're using the particular platform to provide you with content that's relevant. So that's a very basic example of how we've been using AI for the last couple of years without actually actively thinking about AI. But now, in the last 2 years, there's all of these chatbots that have come about. People are now familiar with ChatGPT, where you can actually interact with an AI platform. You can ask it questions and it can provide you with certain information. It's making your research easier. You can put a whole scenario into, for example, ChatGPT, and it will gather all of the information and provide you, with research material that you could use perhaps for an assignment or for a work project, etc. That's now where we're engaging with AI in a more intentional way. So basically, AI is where machines have been set up and programmed, or software rather has been programmed to sort of think and function like a human being. That's a very basic way to sort of define what AI is.
So now, once you start saying like a human being, people start to, get all jittery. Um, sometimes we try and avoid that. Even in the media, we try and avoid using that human angle when discussing AI. We try to make reference to it just be machines that are learning from our responses, but like human, we don't want to hear that. We don't want to talk about it that way. But the thing is, AI has changed the occurrence of cyber threats as well. So, in terms of cyber threats, those have also been in existence for quite a long time. I think you'll agree. But now everything has changed. So, could you give some sort of compare and contrast between traditional cyber that are important because of the advancement of AI?
Yeah, so obviously, with the advancement of AI, cyber criminals have exploited this new technology because AI has allowed cyber criminals to perpetrate cybercrime in a much more efficient, fast, and sophisticated manner. So, if you look at your traditional cybercrimes, such as phishing attacks, now phishing attacks are basically those emails that you receive that are tried where the cyber criminal tries to make it look as though it comes from a legitimate source, like from your bank or from your insurer, etc., trying to get you to click onto a link. Maybe 5 years ago, it was a little bit more easier to identify those phishing attacks because of the spelling errors in the mistakes, or perhaps the logo didn't quite look right, etc. Now, cyber criminals are using AI for these targeted phishing attacks, and these emails are starting to look more and more legitimate. So it's becoming more and more difficult, to identify phishing attacks, for example. The same with malicious software. Malicious software is becoming a lot more complicated. Also, the speed by which cyber criminals can carry out, mass cyber attacks against individuals and organizations is increasing with the use of AI. So definitely, it has allowed for a lot more efficiency on the cyber criminals and cyber syndicates part, because they can now use this technology in a much more efficient manner, so that their attacks are much more intrusive of individuals, private computer systems, as well as organizational computer systems, etc., which is obviously making it more difficult to detect. Now, when you talk about cybersecurity, that's obviously the measures that you want to use to curb these threats from happening. So yes, there's all of these risks that are, from cyber attacks and that sort of thing. But now the benefits of AI from a cybersecurity perspective are many. So obviously, from a technological perspective, you can also use AI to sort of try and predict that kind of behavior. You can use, AI technology to try and identify, possible threats in your system, because it can look for vulnerabilities. And now organizations are dealing with massive volumes of data. And so an AI system can assist in looking for possible vulnerabilities in a particular system, or possible threats that's coming through at a much faster pace than a human being sitting behind the computer can.
So I want to touch on those vulnerabilities themselves. What are the potential vulnerabilities to look out for? This is because some of them, in my opinion, have been advanced because of AI. But in the end, you've just mentioned that because we have AI, you can also detect them quicker. So, a small business owner or a medical facility, what sort of vulnerabilities should they look out for?
So basically, in the realm of cybercrime, there's two main vulnerabilities that any organization would have, right? The one is from the technology side, and that is where you may not have enough technological protection. So you may not have, an antivirus software on your particular network system to prevent, attacks from coming through to your systems, or you might not have, particular firewalls and that sort of thing. So the one is having the right kind of technological cybersecurity tools, which even a small business should have. Obviously, it doesn't have to be the Rolls Royce of tools. It could be what is good enough to protect your business based on how much you use technology. So the one is from a tools perspective. But the second risk, and this is a live risk for any type of organization, big, small, medium, is user behavior. And that is a very, very big risk because you could have the best cybersecurity tools built into your systems, but a vulnerability is human behavior. It is someone viewing an email, not exercising vigilance, and then clicking on a malicious link. It is someone sharing a confidential password. It is someone leaving documents with sensitive information lying around where it can get into the hands of a criminal. And so, for a small business, that is a big vulnerability. It's, do you
Okay.
understand the technology that you are using in your business? When you're using your computer system, are you exercising vigilance when you receive emails? If you receive an email from an unknown source, are you checking, do I recognize this email address? Do I click on this link or not? Um,
Mm.
when you answer a call from an unknown person, are you giving out sensitive information, assuming that, oh, this person is actually calling me from my bank? Or are you going to cut the call and call your bank independently from the
Mm.
number that you do know, and then taking up the conversation there? So for a small business, it's how you are interacting with the technology, and are you doing so in a responsible manner? Are you exercising vigilance? Another thing is urgency. A lot of cyber criminals exploit urgency. So if you receive a call ostensibly from your bank and it's like, I urgently need you to, authorize this particular payment, and you're going to receive an SMS, and I need you to click on that, to protect your bank account. Are you immediately just actioning it, or are you thinking very carefully before you do something like that? I'd like to use one example, which everyone
Okay.
can, hopefully, many people have watched this particular movie. It was a movie by Jason Statham that came out earlier this year, The Beekeeper. And the first
Mm.
15
Yeah.
minutes of that movie is an absolutely prime example of how cybercriminal exploits urgency, human emotion, vulnerability, lack of information on technology, etc. And
Mm.
I'd encourage people to watch that just to get a live example of how that human element can become a huge vulnerability, both for an individual and for an organization.
Sure, sure. So we have a case whereby the average person, the average business owner, is in a hurry. They just want to get stuff done. They're probably expecting maybe 5 to 10 emails an hour, working with different clients around the world. Sifting through all this data, this information that's coming through, they've probably delegated a lot of this information as well. So I guess it sort of it boils down to training and enlightenment at this point. Having specialized, if it's just seminars, webinars, educating everybody in the organization about what to expect and what to avoid. But given your expertise now in anti-bribery, corruption, and compliance, I believe those are the three areas you're into.
Yes.
The legal implications of AI and cybersecurity that organizations need to be aware of, because um, right now there's, I don't know, well, in West Africa, in Nigeria, there are very few regulations around AI and the new technology. There are, of course, cybersecurity laws and regulations and all that, but there's not as much publicity about it, if you get what I'm saying. Um, And I feel like even if there was media addressing it, they probably wouldn't have the actual what vocabulary to even explain it. So I would love for you to sort of break it down, the legal implications of AI with regard to cybersecurity, that organizations, the basic stuff that they need to be aware of.
I think just generally from an AI perspective, you absolutely hit the nail on the head when it comes to AI laws and regulations around the globe, not just in Africa. There aren't that many, developed pieces of legislation and regulations governing AI. Earlier this year in the European Union, we saw the adoption of the EU AI Act, which is regarded as, the first comprehensive set of legislation that's governing the use of AI. And so, obviously, a piece of like a legislation like that is to be welcomed. What we will see going forward in the next couple of years is various jurisdictions throughout the world moving in a similar direction to adopt similar kinds of legislation around the use of AI, etc. And so we're finding that in South Africa as well. We've got, the AI policy framework, which has also been released. So there are certain steps that are being taken to develop laws and regulations around AI throughout the world. But that's obviously going to take a lot of time. It may take a couple of years before we find most jurisdictions having those kinds of laws. Where we are currently when it comes to cybersecurity and issues around data privacy and cybercrime, there are laws in various jurisdictions, like you've said, that deal with cybercrime, which obviously sets out offenses of cybercrime and how, the authorities will go about investigating these kinds of crimes, etc. But then you've also got data privacy legislation, which is particularly important when you're dealing with cybersecurity, because data privacy legislation places an obligation on businesses on how they need to manage the personal information that they hold of their employees, of their customers, of their business partners, etc. And a lot of that legislation does require businesses to have measures in place or cybersecurity measures in place to protect that particular data. And so there's a legislative obligation to have cybersecurity measures in place within your organization to protect against, data breaches, or cybersecurity attacks and that sort of thing. And if, for example, you as a business have suffered a data breach because of a cyber attack, and your customers or clients' personal information has been leaked or been acquired by an unauthorized person as a result of that particular data breach, there could be regulatory sanctions. So you may receive a fine or a penalty, depending on the scale of the breach. And that's from a legislative perspective. But then one also needs to think about it from a practical perspective, the reputational damage on your organization, because people trust you with their information. They enter into a business relationship because they trust you, they trust your brand, they trust the work that you're going to do. And if their information is leaked or is compromised because you didn't have the right kind of systems in place and you didn't handle their data responsibly, reputationally, your business's name is going to suffer. And I always tell my clients that, it can take years to build up a reputation, but it can take minutes or even seconds for that reputation to be destroyed. And you would have seen from, large scale data breaches over the last couple of years, people tend to remember those organizations because of, the bad things that happened. You can do, 50 good things, but one bad thing happens, people tend to remember the bad thing because it's more topical and sort of more newsworthy. So reputational impact is also very, very important for organizations to take into consideration.
So now, the average business is probably thought from a legal standpoint to have, representation with regards maybe issues with the basic transactions, maybe customer care issues, being liable for maybe damaged goods or maybe not delivering on time if they are manufacturing, for instance. But now you are saying they need to add another layer of essentially legal expertise or backing with regards people's information, people's data, especially if they have to register with them. Okay, so just off the top of my head, there's a website I checked out this afternoon, and they sell fresh produce. They sell like vegetables, tomatoes, onions and stuff like that. And they initially asked me so much information, my phone number, my address, and all that. And this is just a farmer that has a great website. But from a legal standpoint, what would this farmer need to have protecting them from, attacks such as phishing attacks based on data breaches? Because I wouldn't want my address to just, go into someone's phishing database, for instance. What should they be looking out for right now?
Yeah, so I think from that farmer's perspective, they're obviously using technology, they're using the internet to sell their goods, which is absolutely amazing from a business perspective. But now they're collecting your personal information, your name, your phone number, your address, and possibly other details of yours that are quite personal to you when you're using their particular website. So they're collecting your information. So from a regulatory perspective, depending on what jurisdiction they operate in, but generally most data privacy legislation throughout the world has these kinds of requirements. What they would be required to have is, from a technology perspective, they need to have the right kind of tools in place to make sure that that data is going to be protected from unauthorized access. And what that means is obviously that data must be stored securely. So obviously, only people in that particular business who need to have access to that information that is being collected should be allowed to access that. So possibly having password protected access into certain files in the business, etc. They also need to give consideration to, for example, the business emails. Who has access to our business emails? Like if it's, for example, an employee's email inbox, is it only that employee that is using that particular inbox? Is there a general business email inbox that's being used, and if so, who are the people in the business that are using that email? So giving thought to who is accessing the information that you have collected of your customers, and from the people that are able to access that information of your customers, do all of those people require access to that information just at an organizational level, right? So making sure that you're giving thought to where you're storing that information. Is that information secure where you are storing it? Who is allowed to have access to that kind of information? And so making sure that you give thought to those kinds of things, right? But then it's also training your employees in the organization on how to handle that information, so that, for example, they've now collected your information. Let's say they print it out in a particular document. They don't take that document, take it home, and then leave that document lying around so that it might get thrown in the rubbish bin at home, and then a cyber criminal can access it, because you do get cyber criminals who do what we call dumpster diving, where they go through people's trash to look for personal information. So it's training employees on managing information that the company collects, with confidentiality and sensitivity, and making sure that they're not leaving things lying around and that sort of thing. Another silly example is,
Mm,
everybody likes to post, or not everybody, most people like to post on Instagram and social media. So sometimes you dressed really nice for work, and now you want to take a selfie about you at work. Are you giving thought to what is on the whiteboard behind you? Is there sensitive information when you're taking that selfie
mhm,
and posting it? So it's also training your employees. So yes, it sounds like a small business, it's just a farm, etc. But it's looking at the
mhm,
basics. Am I handling information
mhm,
responsibly? Am I being a responsible citizen in the way that I conduct my business?
mm, mm. I want to touch on, so obviously having responsible business owners uh, borders on that takes us into a completely other direction. I'm trying to veer back in now, um, because of this issue of whistleblowing and anti-money laundering regulations. Now, with regards AI, it stepped everything up a notch, but it also means that uh, there are different ways, sadly, that people are being used for nefarious activities. For instance, there was a story of a particular car dealer in Nigeria here who, had someone come into the dealership and look around and pick a particular car and say he wanted the car, and then next thing he knew, the guy was paying for the car. No questions asked. He asked for the account number of the dealership, and he was credited. Made a sale, and the customer then says, "You know what? I'm gonna send someone to come pick the car up tomorrow." right? And we're wondering, why not just take the car today? But he says he's already paid, so you know, keeping it on the shelf for one more day is not going to do anything, right? No harm done. But the next day, he comes back and says, you know what, sorry, I can't take the car anymore. You know what, can I get my money back? So at this point, obviously, the policy of the dealership is to, take off a little bit of percentage for charges. But of course, refund your money, the car is still in the lot. But then after the gentleman had left, a few hours later, police come up, and accuse the dealership of receiving money for kidnapping, ransom. And that was essentially that gentleman's way, or I'm calling him a gentleman, that thief's way, or that kidnapper's way of, receiving, or should I say, laundering money through that dealership. Now, this is a story that's probably a lot more common than I know about, and there are probably other situations like that business owners might have to deal with. But where do they begin, and what are the things that business owners need to look out for so that they don't fall prey to situations like this?
Yeah, I think in the example that you used, obviously there were a couple of red flags, a very quick transaction. And in the sales world, obviously businesses do want these quick transactions. You do want to move cars, you do want to sell cars and that sort of thing, right? But depending on what your business is, now we've used an example of a motor vehicle dealership, right? Now I'm not sure what the AML legislation in Nigeria is, for example. But in South Africa, for example, our anti money laundering legislation was amended toward the end of last year, where the list of institutions that are required by law to conduct a know your client process now includes dealers in high value goods. So that would include, for example, a car dealer who's selling goods above 100,000 rand. What they are then required to do is conduct a KYC or know your client on the particular individual. And so conducting that know your client process, could possibly either delay the deal because obviously you're going to ask for certain documentation. You want to verify who is this person that's come into my dealership that is wanting to do this deal. Have I satisfied myself that I'm dealing with someone that is not high risk, someone that's got a known business profile, someone that is able to provide me with what their source of funds are to fund this particular vehicle. So you'll ask for a whole host of documentation to get to know them, which then could curtail possibly something like this from happening. But that's in the example that we've
Yeah.
used. But let's say you've got another particular business where it may not necessarily fall within the ambit of anti-money laundering legislation. My advice to any business out there from a practical perspective is that it is very, very good business practice and highly advisable that no matter what business you conduct, specifically when you're dealing with large amounts of cash transactions and large volumes or high value goods, etc., it's important to know who you're doing business with. Because if you inadvertently end up doing
Okay.
business with somebody who is subsequently found to be a criminal or part of an organized crime syndicate, etc., your business could also suffer reputational damage from that. Or possibly, like in the example you've used, you would have the authorities knocking at your door to say that, did you know that this business partner had paid you from the proceeds of unlawful activities? And so it is definitely, from a commercial crime perspective, very, very good business practice, to know who you're dealing, who you're doing business with. And doing some sort of verification and not just relying on the fact that somebody, walked into your showroom floor and wanted to do a particular deal, but trying to verify who is the person behind this, what is the profile of this person, so that I'm comfortable that I'm dealing with someone that is going to do business with me ethically, someone that's not going to result in my business's reputation suffering because, they perhaps would have received those money through corrupt means or whatever the case may be.
So, it does feel like a lot of people are in this whole microwave movement. They want everything like that, they want it so fast. So, essentially, what you've said is with all the KYCs, you're going to delay the average customer, making them fill forms, making them give details. And people get annoyed by that, and if there are many options, if there are many dealerships on that street, for instance, that guy's lost a sale. I'm just saying, there are a lot of websites now that sell cars as well and stuff like that. And that little extra delay might lead to me getting distracted by something else on my phone and moving away from that website. It's just a fine line. So in the end, based on this real world example we've already given, do you advise that people still go through with the entire KYC process, or are there some exceptions?
Yeah, I think every business is going to be different, right? So you need to, as a starting point, look at your particular business. Look at, are you selling goods? Are you providing services? Look at the value of, the transactions that you would engage in as a particular business, because that would also guide you, because every business's risk profile is going to be different. So always start off by doing a risk assessment so that you understand your particular risks. And obviously, those would be your commercial crime risks. You would look at your regulatory risks. Am I a business that falls within the ambit of anti-money laundering legislation, where I'm required by law to conduct these KYC processes, etc.? Because if I am, then by law I have to do it. If I'm not, then I would want to do it, or at least some level of due diligence on who I'm doing business with, to protect my business from a commercial perspective. And then you formulate, based on the risk profile that I've identified, what kind of measures do I put in place that gives me the comfort that I need to protect my business, but at the same time not curtailing the commercial profitability of running my business. So it's striking the right balance in making sure that your procedures that you implement in the business directly correlate to the risk that you're facing. So the higher the risk, the more procedures you want. The lower the risk, you can then get away with maybe doing, some basic procedures, etc. But ultimately, it does require some active thought, because you can't have a one size fits approach for every single business, because the risk profile of every business is inherently going to be different. And so it's a case of introspection and looking at what's going to work for your business.
Honestly, I'm so appreciative that you've been able to break this all down and smoothly. I have to say, you've not missed a beat. I still have loads of questions with regards international regulations when it comes to cybersecurity. But I guess there's probably a few websites you can visit to get all this information, right? From an international standpoint.
Yeah, there's a wealth of material out there on, artificial intelligence, on cybersecurity, on anti-corruption, on anti-money laundering, etc. There's a lot of global organizations that that will have papers around these things. You've got Transparency International. I'm just thinking off the top of my head. You've got, the IMF. You've got so many. I can't. There's a massive list of various organizations. You've got the OECD as well. They will have a lot of material, on anti-corruption measures that organizations may want to have in place. But start off by, doing, some searches on the internet around cybersecurity, around artificial intelligence. That just starts giving you a bit of an understanding. And then you'll find, some of these papers that these organizations have published, and they're very, very useful reading material. And it's definitely a good starting point for the normal business person out there, just to educate oneself around, how do I manage this whole new world that I'm living in, where, like you said, it's instant gratification. Everything has to happen very quickly. But while all of these things are happening quickly, I also need to protect myself. So it's quite information overload. But I think, a little bit of bedtime reading will go a long way in just helping us protect ourselves, because it's not just protecting our businesses, it's protecting ourselves as individuals. Because, if our businesses suffer, our income suffer, and then we suffer personally as well. But so our criminals, whether cyber criminals, organized crime syndicates, they attack individuals as well. So all of this knowledge out there around anti-money laundering, anti-corruption, cybercrime, etc., definitely will help both individuals and businesses to protect themselves.
I have to say a big thank you to you for joining us over the past 30 minutes. I'm talking about Zaakir Mohamed, the Director, Head of Corporate Investigations and Forensics for CMS South Africa. Thank you so much for joining us. We're wrapping it up now, but we know that there's still so many questions yet to be answered. Please use our comment section, the comment section or the chat box on whatever platform you are listening or viewing us from, and I'll make sure that Zaakir gets the questions and tries to respond to them online. Hopefully, you're interested in doing that.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you very much,
Good.
Titile, and thank you very much to the viewers out there as well for listening in.
I'm going to be connecting with you via LinkedIn. I believe it's the same name. Yes.
Absolutely.
All right, then. And the conversation, of course, continues. Thank you so much,
Thank you,
Zaakir.
Titile.
All right. Now we are a little fast spent on time, but the issue we've been discussing is such an interesting one that one day is definitely not enough to wrap our heads around, because of the over 17 years experience in law that Zaakir has, specializing in anti-bribery, corruption, and compliance. Now, his expertise extends to advising clients on various critical pieces of legislation, including South Africa's Prevention and Combating of Corrupt Activities Act, Financial Intelligence Center Act, and Cybercrimes Act. There are quite a few of these that we probably need to update here in Nigeria, but there are, of course, some international bodies that are also taking this extremely seriously. And obviously, with his context, we've been able to take a few tips regarding safeguarding the information we have for our businesses in this digital age we find ourselves in. Yes, no matter how small your business is, if you have an Instagram page, a Facebook page, or a website, and you need to take people's information, even if it's just for deliveries, you need to take note that with this new world of AI, there are a lot more cybersecurity risks that you need to be aware of. Now, if you missed any aspect of this, you can always go back and watch it again. It's right there on YouTube. Just look for TT the Dynamite, and of course, Dynamite Podcast Network. And yeah, you'll be able to watch it over again. Or indeed, listen to it once again. We are, of course, on Spotify. We're on Apple Podcasts. We're also on iHeartRadio. And in fact, wherever you get your podcasts, we are right there. If you would like to be on one-on-one sometime soon, it's very simple. Just send us an email. That's Dynamite Podcast Network at gmail.com. That's Dynamite Podcast Network at gmail.com. And we will get back to you. Once again,